The Future Fishing Boat Clone 1 Chapter 1. Start a small fishing boat 3020 AD, 1000 years in the new calendar, 1000 years after the catastrophe. In the depths of the vast starry sky of the universe, a water blue life planet exudes fascinating colors. This is a planet with human civilization. Her name is Blue Star. Originally, this planet had a lot of land area, nearly half the area of the ocean. However, 1000 years ago, the heavens and the earth changed. The icebergs of the North and South Poles melted and the sea level rose. In the end, pieces of land collapsed and sank, and areas were covered by sea water, leaving only islands formed by high mountains. After most of these high mountains were submerged, a small part of the isolated island was left exposed to the surface of the sea, which became the only place for terrestrial creatures to survive, and survival has become more difficult than ever. However, before the disaster struck, the high-level human beings had already made preparations, creating a series of suspended islands floating high in the sky, and the elites in the society were taken to the suspended islands. Various high-tech inheritances have also been transferred to the hanging island, keeping the fire of human civilization as much as possible. It has become the only safe place when disaster strikes. More people fell in the tsunami that broke out when the disaster came, and a small number retreated to the island formed by the high mountains and began to struggle to survive. Then came the revival of heaven and earth, and the mutation of marine life. Mankind has also begun a difficult struggle, fighting for a re-emergence, and fighting for the confused future. After thousands of years of hard work, mankind has regained a firm foothold, society has stabilized again, and cultivation civilization has also begun to develop at a high speed, and scientific and technological civilization has become an auxiliary. On the boundless sea, on a small island, there is a village on it called Bayun Village. There are more than 1,000 households with a population of about 2,000 to 3,000 people. Outside the village, in a shabby courtyard, Oyu Shoutian woke up from bed. After sitting up, Oyu Shoutian shook his dizzy head, and then began to look around. The strange memories in his mind also began to merge. Reborn? Such an incredible thing. Actually happened? Is the future after the catastrophe still an orphan? After Oyu Shoutian figured out his situation, he muttered to himself in surprise. It is a pity that he is still an orphan in this life. A year ago, his parents had disappeared in the vast sea, and it is estimated that they have been buried in the sea. This body has the same name as him, and after the memories have merged, they have no distinction between each other. I have been an orphan for more than 30 years in my previous life. How much I hope I have relatives in this life. Unfortunately, I still don't have any. I'm still alone, and I will still rely on myself in the future. Oyu Shoutian came to the mirror and looked at the strange and familiar face, but he felt very heavy. The most important fishing trial failed. What should I do? His head was fully awake, and after figuring out the situation of this body, he began to worry. The original body was in a coma because not long ago, he followed the angler in Bayun village to participate in a fishing trial, but was knocked out by a big fish, causing the trial to fail. The most important thing is that he was kicked out of the trial team by the angler Wang Su, who led the team and lost the qualification for the trial. There is no school in the village, and the children are taught knowledge by the old people in the village. Wang Su is the angler in the village, and he is also a high-ranking figure in the village. If he was ousted from the trial team, if there were no accidents, Oyu Shoutian would be dead in his life. Because this trial is so important, after the rise of the cultivation civilization, the will of heaven and earth changes. As long as human beings pass the trial, catch the spirit fish with their own hands, and then cook it through secret methods, after eating it, they can awaken the talented soul. The best age for awakening was 12 years old. Oyu Shoutian happened to be 12 years old, so he participated in the fishing trial, but was knocked out by the spirit fish. In addition, the performance has been poor, so he was kicked out of the trial team. If you want to awaken in the future, you can only rely on him. There will be no one to lead him, but going to sea by yourself is almost like looking for death, so I say that this life is finished. Forget it, I don't want so much. There must be a road before the mountain, and the boat will be straight at the end of the bridge. There will always be a way. Oyu Shoutian cheered up again, looked at himself in the mirror again, and felt a lot better. Although he was far inferior to others, he was also a level 1 angler anyway. Compared with the self in the previous life, he is much stronger. The body of only 12 years old looks extremely strong, at least with the strength of an adult in the previous life. Then he turned around and saw the bowl on the table near the bed. It was left by Yoon Duor, his playmate from childhood. He was able to wake up now thanks to Yoon Duor's bowl of Juling fish soup. He failed in the trial, but Yoon Duor succeeded. He caught a swordfish with his own hands and stewed it with medicinal materials. After eating, he awakened the talented Yin-Yang swordfish and was rewarded with 3 bowls of Juling fish soup. After Oyu Shoutian was injured by the big fish, Yoon Duor fed him a bowl without hesitation, so that his injury stabilized. This girl, you don't need to consolidate the talented soul that has just been awakened. This girl actually gave yourself a bowl. This is really too much for him, so how can I pay it back? Oyu Shoutian was moved. In their small fishing village, cultivation resources like Juling fish soup were quite precious, and even if they had money, they might not be able to buy them. It seems that I can only find a way to repay in the future. As a rebirth, Oyu Shoutian still has this confidence. Then he wandered around the house, from the bedroom to the hall, and then to the kitchen. His face was getting more and more ugly. This house can be said to be a stubborn family. There is no valuables. Even the rice tank in the kitchen is empty. It is estimated that even the mouse can't survive. Poor, really poor is unimaginable, even poorer than he was an orphan in his previous life. I recalled that in the year he lost his parents, he basically relied on his neighbors for relief. If it weren't for these neighbors, I'm afraid he would not survive now. It seems that there are a lot of people who need to repay, but the most urgent thing is to prepare a little bit of food first, otherwise you will be hungry when the energy of the soul-gathering fish soup in your stomach is exhausted. After Oyu Shoutian figured out his own situation, he began to worry about his livelihood. After rummaging through boxes and cabinets for a long time, I found all the places I could find. In the end, only a few seed coins were found, which was not enough for him to eat a meal. It seemed that he could only find another way. Did you go to the neighbor's grandfather's house to have a meal again? If he was the 12-year-old before, he would definitely have a mixed meal, but he is now in his 30s. Then let him run to the neighbors to eat and drink, and he can't get through that level in his heart. Others have golden fingers when they are born again. Where's my golden fingers? Am I so unlucky? Oyu Shoutian felt a little weak in his heart. The knowledge of the previous life is basically useless. If you don't have cheats, it's really not easy. The only thing you can rely on is your mature mentality. After looking at the old pieces of furniture in the house again, after knowing that he really couldn't find valuable things, Oyu Shoutian turned and walked outside the house, thinking of a solution as he walked. However, when he walked to the yard and saw the small fishing boat left by his parents, Oyu Shoutian's figure was frozen. He seemed to see another himself. It was a very strange feeling. How should I say that the small fishing boat is like his other body, and he can control the various driving formations that come to the door as long as his mind moves. Is this my golden finger? After Oyu Shoutian came back to his senses, he suddenly smiled, and the whole person was a lot more relaxed, no longer as depressed as before. It seems that all the previous difficulties are not a problem. Chapter 2, Surprise brought by clone. New book asks for support. Oyu Shoutian did 2 steps in 3 steps and quickly ran to the small wooden fishing boat. He checked with joy. He was basically sure that this small fishing boat was his golden finger. The moment he saw the small fishing boat, he knew that he still had a consciousness, awakened in the body of the small fishing boat. He could easily control everything in the small fishing boat, just like manipulating his own body. Perhaps when he was reborn, his consciousness was divided into 2 strands, one large and one small. One strand fell on the current body, the other fell on the small fishing boat. Fortunately, not all consciousness falls on the small fishing boat, otherwise it will regenerate into a boat and lose the human body, then it will be really cheating. When Oyu Shoutian thought of this, he couldn't help but feel extremely grateful that he was still an individual. Soon, he began to check the specific situation of the fishing boat clone. When his consciousness merged into the small fishing boat also had a mysterious change, which was transformed by a mysterious energy, which should have been brought over by him when he was reborn. So this small fishing boat is actually not the original small fishing boat. It has been mutated, and has many incredible functions on the original basis. One is that fishing boats can be upgraded by devouring specific materials. The second is that the radar array originally drawn on the fishing boat has also undergone earth-shaking changes. Items within 1 kilometer can be scanned and deduced to view basic information. The deduction is mainly for knowledge of exercises and techniques. Moreover, the fishing boat clone is another body of Oyu Shoutian. He directly remembered and mastered the thing scanned by the radar. A sweep of the radar meant that he would never forget it. The third is that the fishing boat clone has an additional function of possession, which can be turned into a mark and attached to the body. Well, this golden finger is awesome. With this golden finger, I won't be able to awaken even if I don't believe it. Isn't it just a spirit fish? I will definitely get it done. Oyu Shoutian couldn't help laughing excitedly, squinting at the golden finger interface in front of him, the interface that only he could see. Doppelganger, wooden sailboat grade, small wooden boat speed, 12 milliseconds armor, weak main artillery, heavy crossbow, with a range of 600 meters, reloading for 3 seconds radar, first level scanning deduction, can scan objects in a radius of 1 kilometer to view basic information possession, turned into a mark, attached to the body upgrade, 3 tons of paulownia wood strips, 5 tons of white walnut wood, 1 ton of birch wood, and 2 tons of iron wood are required with a thought. The avatar of the fishing boat turned into a mark, attached to Oyu Shoutian's arm. The design of a small fishing boat was lifelike, just like a natural tattoo on his arm. Then Oyu Shoutian began to check other places in the courtyard. With the golden finger, he no longer worried about the problem of eating, and he was in the mood to check it slowly. The entire yard is small, about 50 square meters, like a dilapidated farmhouse. The right side of the yard is the kitchen, and the left side is a pool of 10 square meters, which is used to store the fish. It's a pity that it's empty and there is no water, so let's not talk about small fish or shrimp. There is also a big tank beside the pool, but inside it is a tank of clean water, which should be the usual domestic water. It's time to go to the beach. With radar scanning, you should be able to find some food. After Oyu Shoutian inspected the yard, he was ready to go out. As for the abandoned fish pond in the yard, he didn't plan to clean it out for the time being, so he had to be full. So the main task at the moment is to go out and grab some seafood to fill the stomach. Preparing to go to the beach, Oyu Shoutian couldn't help but check his own strength, directly scanned his own data with a radar, and quickly displayed it through the attribute interface. Character, Oyu Shoutian. Realm, Level 1 Fisherman Spiritual Power, 6, Gongla, Spiritual Power Forging Body Art, incomplete version. The current realm of skin refining once can deduce the supplementary exercise method. It needs 10,000 points of spiritual energy. This strength is really the 5 scum. Looking at the attribute interface, Oyu Shoutian couldn't help but shook his head. He was only a first level fisherman at the age of 12. No wonder he could not pass the trial. Most of the other 12-year-old children were senior fishermen. Even if it's a bit close, at least there is a level 4 or 5. Shaking his head, Oyu Shoutian was ready to go out. Even if he was weak, he still had to eat. But before he reached the door, the gate of the yard was knocked, and when he opened the door, Yun Duor in a strong suit came to visit him. Brother Shoutian, how is your health? Is it better? As soon as Yun Duor came in, he opened his eyes wide, and looked at Oyu Shoutian from top to bottom. After making sure that there was no problem, he was obviously relieved. It's much better, thanks to your juling fish soup, otherwise I might still be lying on the bed. Oyu Shoutian looked at Yun Duor's gaze a little moved. As an adult, he had seen too many intrigues, and he really cherished the innocent feelings of these two little wits. Yun Duor couldn't help being a little curious. How did you know that I gave you juling fish soup? At that time, Oyu Shoutian was in a coma. Could he still perceive the outside world? Oyu Shoutian smiled slightly, and said, "Girl, you forgot to take the bowl specially used for juling fish soup, so I guessed it." "What girl? I've grown up, don't bark." Yun Duor pouted her little mouth and said unhappy. Oyu Shoutian couldn't help but smiled. He also subconsciously regarded her as a child. After all, he was already in her 30s mentally, and Yun Duor was just a 12-year-old girl. "Well, I just want to go out, let's talk while walking." Oyu Shoutian closed the gate of the yard, and then the two of them walked and talked, walking outside. Next, you should practice hard first. Don't go to the fishing grounds. Don't worry, when my strength rises, I will help you awaken. Yoon Duoer said cautiously as he walked. She also knew that Oyu Shoutian was kicked out of the trial team. It must be very sad. It was not good to mention this topic, but she was even more worried that he ran to the fishing ground quietly. Coupled with taking into account Oyu Shoutian's self-esteem, she looks cautious. Oyu Shoutian smiled bitterly and said, "Don't worry, I don't have a certain degree of certainty. I won't be stupid and go to the fishery to die by myself." The small fishing village is not very big. The two of them walked and talked, and soon they came to the bustling square. There were children practicing and some were selling seafood. The trial team in the fishing village is also practicing in the square. Su Niufei, Su Hebo, and Zhang Pengpeng, whom Oyu Shoutian was familiar with, were all there. They had been training together not long ago, but now he has been kicked out of the team. "Oyu Shoutian, what are you doing here? The teacher has kicked you out." Su Hebo stepped forward and stared closely at Oyu Shoutian. His gaze was full of contempt, and he obviously despised the extremely weak Oyu Shoutian. "Duoer, why are you still with this waste? Let's hurry up and practice with us. Although you are now awakened, you are still some distance away from being promoted to the angler, so you have to take it well." Zhang Pengpeng also said aloud. In his opinion, if Oyu Shoutian hadn't drank Yoon Duoer's bowl of Juling fish soup, I'm afraid Yoon Duoer had successfully broken through. The stronger Yoon Duoer, the safer they would act together. So it was Oyu Shoutian's fault. "You guys." Yoon Duoer opened her mouth and was about to say something when she was stopped by Oyu Shoutian. "Okay, they are right, don't waste time with me, and practice well with them. I'm going around alone, don't worry about me." Seeing Oyu Shoutian's serious expression, Yoon Duoer nodded and said, "Okay, be careful alone." After that, Oyu Shoutian ignored Su Hebo and others who were full of contempt, and turned around and left. Yoon Duoer also stayed in the square and trained with Su Hebo and others. Although she has successfully awakened her talented soul, she is still a senior fisherman now. It hasn't been officially promoted to the level of the angler, and it will take a while. Chapter 3, Touch the Beach. For collection, after leaving the fishing village square, Oyu Shoutian quickened his pace and walked towards the beach, continuing with what he had planned. He is now penniless, and there is no other way except this way. Unless he can let go of his adult self-esteem, borrow money from Yoon Duoer, a kid, or go to a neighbor to eat with him, he can only rely on himself. So after he left the fishing village, he went straight to the beach. Whistling, whizzing. The sea breeze is very strong, and the waves are constantly beating against the reefs on the shore. In the endless sea, you can see white waves rising from a distance and rushing towards the shore. The boundless sea made Oyu Shoutian's mood agitated, and he couldn't help but rise with arrogance. Zhang Mu looked around and could see that many people were catching seafood on the beach. Most of them were senior fishermen who were elder, afraid to go to the fishing grounds, and could only catch ordinary seafood on the beach. And not far away, there is a watchtower with a guard team organized by the fishing village patrolling. If the villagers are in danger, they will rush to rescue. But their most important task is to observe the sea surface and watch out for pirates. In this era of great navigation, there are a lot of rampant pirate forces. From time to time, fishing villages are attacked by pirate forces. It is impossible not to set up watchtowers and patrols. Without further ado, after Oyu Shoutian glanced around, he started to act. With a thought in his mind, the radar scanning function was activated, and everything within a kilometer range appeared in his perception, as if he saw it with his own eyes, and it was clearer than his eyes. You can also get the basic information of the item, whether it is a threat to him, it is clear. Radar, the eyes of the fishing boat clone, is also his second pair of eyes. It has a magical ability and is even more powerful than the gods in myths and legends. After all, even if it is a divine sense, it is impossible to identify the basic information of an item. Ha ha ha, I found it. Oyu Shoutian smiled happily, but found that there were many good things in the depths of several reef cracks on the seashore, including sea crabs, sea mussels, scallops, etc., all good things. After confirming that there was no danger, Oyu Shoutian quickly came to a reef containing sea crabs and began to catch sea crabs. He bent over and leaned down, reached out, and grabbed, and directly caught a Large sea crab, the size of an adult's palm, and it was very plump. Name, Portunus level, level 0 quality, normal aura, 3 points effect, contains a small amount of spiritual energy, barely enough to eat. The radar swept away, and the basic information about this sea crab also appeared in front of Oyu Shoutian, but only he could see this information interface, which was full of science fiction. Only 3 auras, this ordinary seafood is really terrible. Oyu Shoutian was a little depressed, but with his current strength, he could only catch these ordinary seafood. If he caught a grade, he would be killed every minute. Of course, this swimming crab is not small for ordinary people. If it is caught by the crab claws, the fingers can be pinched. However, Oyu Shoutian is also a fisherman at any rate. Even if he is a first-level fisherman, his skin has been tempered once, and it is extremely tough. The crab claws clamped on his hand, it would not hurt him at all. This is why he dared to reach out and grab it directly. With a thought in his mind, the struggling swimming crab was put into the fish cabin of the fishing boat clone. The space inside was not large, but there were about 10 cubic meters, which was enough to use. The most important thing is that you can store living things, and you can put in the caught seafood. One after another, Oyu Shoutian one after another found 6 swimming crabs from under the reef, all of which were slap-sized and good enough for him to eat. After successfully harvesting a few swimming crabs, Oyu Shoutian also smiled openly. However, he was not satisfied with the current harvest, but continued to act and rushed to the next relatively hidden seafood den. This time he harvested 9 swimming crabs. Every day, people catch seafood at the beach, and ordinary places have long been turned over and over again. If it hadn't been for radar scanning, it would be hard to say whether Oyu Shoutian could catch seafood. After all, his predecessor had too little experience, and he was still a child. Now there is radar scanning, but it can be done easily, even in the afternoon. Many places have been searched, but he found a lot of good products. Time passed quietly, and it took more than an hour to harvest a total of 30 swimming crabs, 16 sea mussels, and 15 scallops, enough for him to eat today. As for tomorrow's, waiting for another visit tomorrow morning, you will definitely gain more, because after the high tide and low tide at night, many new products will appear on the beach. As long as you come to catch the sea in the morning and come before other people search, the harvest will not be bad. After checking the time, it was already past 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and Oyu Shoutian decided to go back. When he was about to pass the fishing village square, he chose a detour. He didn't want to disturb Yun Duo's practice for the time being, so he changed the direction and detoured back to his home. He hasn't awakened his talented soul yet, so he can only cook and eat the spiritual power of these seafood by himself. It cannot be swallowed by the soul, which will cause a certain amount of waste, which is inevitable. When I came to the kitchen and took a look, there were no other seasonings except table salt. I had no choice but to cook it in one pot. As for the taste, it was not the most important thing at the moment. Wash the pot, put half a pot of water, and then heat up. Then I came to the yard to clean the harvested seafood. After the water boiled, put them in the pot and simmered them for about half an hour, and then turned off the fire until they were done well. Began to eat. A swimming crab was quickly eaten by him, and some of the spiritual power contained in the swimming crab meat was quickly absorbed by him, each of which was about 3 to 5 o'clock, and there would be some loss during the cooking process. However, his strength is too low. Even if it is lost, the spiritual power contained in a swimming crab can restore his spiritual power to the upper limit. First deduced and perfected the exercise technique. Oyu Shoutian hesitated and made a decision. The radar deduction function was activated and began to consume the spiritual power in the body, and he also accelerated the speed of eating, absorbing spiritual power while consuming spiritual power. The 30 swimming crabs were quickly eaten by him. Excluding the lost parts, he averaged 3 points of spiritual power for each of the swimming crabs. He had absorbed almost 90 points of spiritual power in total, but it was not enough. Soon, 3 sea mussels were eaten by him, making up 100 spiritual power. The spiritual power contained in the sea mussel is more, and it can only absorb to about 4 points each time. Some sea mussels even have excessive spiritual power, and the pearls are condensed in the body, but most of them are very small. They are all inferior pearls and have little effect. After he absorbed more than 100 points of spiritual power, the radar issued a reminder. The first stage of the deduction was over, and the reminder appeared directly in his mind. Existing exercise. Spiritual forging body art, incomplete. The current leather refining realm is tempered once. Remarks. This is a castrated and streamlined exercise method that has been passed down through endless years. The original is lost and it is already incomplete. It requires 10,000 points of aura to complete the deduction. The current degree of evolution, 100100000, and the leather refining environment, has been repaired and perfected. After reading the tips, Oyu Shoutian knew that the part of the skin refining stage had been repaired and perfected, and the next point was to use the spiritual power in the body to temper the skin and improve the strength. Chapter 4, First Practice, Recommendation Ticket Required. Next, Oyu Shoutian started his first practice, while eating, while performing spiritual exercises, began to temper his skin, starting with the skin of his hands. It didn't hurt, but there was a numb and itchy sensation coming from my hands, which was very uncomfortable. This feeling is more unbearable than pain. Oyu Shoutian couldn't help frowning. His hands were numb and itchy, and he almost couldn't help scratching each other, but he gritted his teeth and resisted it. During the process of skin tempering, he must not scratch. What made him feel fortunate was that, compared to what he remembered, the speed of tempering the skin after perfect forging was much faster, and the sea clam had only eaten half of it, and he had completed the tempering of his hands. This tempering speed was at least countless times faster than before, and the utilization rate of spiritual power was much higher. Then came the feet, and then the body. When all the seafood had been eaten, Oyu Shoutian had completed the tempering of his whole body skin, achieved a second time of leather refining, and successfully promoted to a level 3 fisherman and 2 consecutive levels. The predecessor has been cultivating for several years, only to catch the first level of the apprentice. I didn't expect me to rise to level 3 so quickly. The corners of Oyu Shoutian's mouth curled slightly, looking a little proud. I checked the time and found that it was already past 9 o'clock in the evening. I was immersed in cultivation before, and I didn't even notice the darkness, so I couldn't help standing up and turning on the lights in the house. This lamp is also a product of the combination of technology and cultivation civilization. The pattern replaces the circuit, and the aura in the air is gathered as an energy source through the array method, instead of electric energy. It is much easier to use than high-tech solar lights. I simply took a shower, and the time was over 10 o'clock, and I couldn't do much at this point, so Oyu Shoutian simply went to bed and went directly to bed. In the morning, the orange sun rises from the east. The tide had just ebbed on the beach, and a large number of reefs had just been exposed, and Oyu Shoutian, carrying a fish basket, had already arrived at the beach. A lot of villagers from the fishing village have come, and they have been groping around the sea in 2s and 3s, and they are all rushing for a day's livelihood, looking for something that can be used as food. Shoutian, you are here too. I heard that you were kicked out of the trial team. Are you okay? It was an old man, Mr. Liu, who was Oyu Shoutian's neighbor. He had taken care of Oyu Shoutian since he was a child. Mr. Liu has no children. Perhaps in his eyes, the children in the village are his children. Uncle Liu, I'm fine, don't worry. I can wake up alone, but I have to become stronger before that? Oyu Shoutian smiled and said that he was okay. Uncle Liu couldn't help but nodded in relief, but also let go. Okay, you are in a good state of mind. I am relieved. Or follow me to find something to eat. I will teach you how to find it. Obviously, Uncle Liu was worried that Oyu Shoutian had no experience and was ready to teach him. Just as Oyu Shoutian was about to refuse, Uncle Liu took his hand and walked towards the beach by the sea. He was not allowed to refuse at all, so he had to follow. However, Bo Liu was indeed an experienced fisherman, and soon discovered. Shoutian, look here, there are a few trachoma. There must be good things underneath. You can dig and see. Bo Liu pointed to a few small holes on the beach and said aloud, Okay, Uncle Liu. Oyu Shoutian nodded and said. In fact, he used the radar to scan and determined that there was an octopus hiding underneath, so after gently pushing away a layer of sand, he reached out and caught the octopus. Good job, put it away, Liu Bo said with satisfaction. Oyu Shoutian put the octopus into the fish basket behind him, and then thanked him. Uncle Liu, thank you so much. I will do it myself next, and I will look at these trachoma. He is not going to continue following Uncle Lu, or he will be embarrassed if he will let him do everything he finds and give him everything. Well, then you look for it slowly, pay attention to safety. If you don't understand, come and ask me at any time. Lu Bo nodded and said. Then the two separated, and Oyu Shoutian walked in the other direction. He knew that Uncle Lu would definitely observe him in secret, so he quickly dug out a few black-shelled crabs on the beach through radar scanning, and then took it in his hand and threw it at Uncle Lu. This kid seems to have really learned it. Lu Bo smiled slightly and was relieved. He stopped paying attention to Oyu Shoutian and began to concentrate on searching for seafood hiding on the beach. He is getting older. Although he is also a senior fisherman, his physical functions have declined and his strength has dropped a lot. It would be dangerous to go to the fishing grounds, so he can only come to the beach every morning to look for it. There are many people like him, most of them are elderly, and some are children under 12 years old. Without gossip, after Oyu Shoutian acted alone, he soon let go of his hands and feet, and went directly to the seaside reef to explore. Those places are the most seafood. What a big lobster, it's amazing. Oyu Shoutian grabbed a 50-centimeter large lobster from a crack in the reef and smiled happily. Name, Deep Sea Lobster Level 0 Quality, Normal Aura, 32 points. Effect, contains a small amount of spiritual power. The meat is delicious, can be eaten up, can also be used to supplement spiritual power. A lobster actually had 32 points of spiritual power. For Oyu Shoutian, it was a treasure. When he was happy, he quickly put the lobster into the fish tank space, and then continued to catch the rest. Time passed quietly, and it was just after 12 noon. Unknowingly, the other villagers had already returned one after another, even Uncle Lu had left. Ordinary villagers without space and equipment, relying on a small fish basket, are basically full, and they will go back around 10 o'clock. It took Oyu Shoutian 2 more hours, but he had already filled more than 10 cubic meters of fish tank space. It could be said that the harvest was full, enough for him to eat for a few days. This is the efficiency brought by radar. The sun is really shining, and it's almost time to go back. Oyu Shoutian looked up at the sun that had climbed above his head, and decided to go back. The fish tank space is already full, and even if he doesn't go back, there is no place to load the seafood he caught. It's up to him to choose the best goods to start with, otherwise it will be full. When passing by the square, Oyu Shoutian did not find Yun Duoer and the others. Obviously they should have gone to the fishing ground. He didn't think much about it, but speeded up and returned home. Before practicing, cleaned the fish pond and released the fish in the fish tank space. After returning to the yard, Oyu Shoutian took a look at the dirty fish pond, and soon settled his attention. Sooner or later, it will be cleaned, so let's just do it now, just do it. Turn on the tap water, and he starts to wash the fish pond. It took almost an hour to clean the fish pond and then refilled with seawater. The water was drawn from the water tower by the fishing village, and the water pipe was connected and ready for use. After filling the seawater, Oyu Shoutian released the seafood in the fish tank, but there was no aquatic plants in the fish pond, no small fishes and shrimps, and these seafood would not last long. Then he went back to the kitchen to wash the pot and boil water, this time using the fresh water in the water tank. Oyu Shoutian chose 10 swimming crabs, 10 pipi prawns, 10 sea mussels and 10 scallops. For today's lunch, maybe dinner is also on budget. He is now a level 3 fisherman, and the upper limit of spiritual power in his body is 38 points. Before eating, he must use up these spiritual powers to avoid waste. So after the preparations were done, he began to practice. The operation of the spiritual power forging technique controls the spiritual power in the body, starting from the limbs, and then the torso, step by step, and finally completes the whole body's skin at a time. Soon, the numb and itchy sensation in his hands rose again, and he was a little used to it. Whenever the spiritual power in his body was about to run out, Oyu Shoutian would eat seafood in the pot to replenish it. Although it was troublesome, he felt very happy as his strength improved little by little. Chapter 5, Juling Fish Soup. In the evening, the afterglow of the setting sun was scattered in the small courtyard. Oyu Shoutian also practiced for a whole afternoon, but only completed the tempering of the skin of his hands. The third skinning was much more difficult than the second, not as fast as the second. But in just one afternoon, he completed the tempering of his hands, which was already unimaginable faster than others. Many 9th level fishermen just choose to refine their skins 3 times before starting the next level of refinement. For example, Wang Sukai, the leader of the trial team, had only refined his skin 3 times during the skin refining stage, and then proceeded to the flesh refining realm. After refining the meat, it is impossible to go back to refining the skin, but it is too difficult to temper it many times. Many people take 3 to 5 years for the 3rd tempering, let alone more times. Therefore, if Oyu Shaoshan's tempering speed is mentioned, it will definitely amaze countless people. This speed seems to be a lot slower. Oyu Xiaotian seemed a little dissatisfied. He also knew that the 3rd tempering would be a lot more difficult, but he didn't expect it would be so difficult. Then the 4th time, the 5th time, and the subsequent times, how difficult it is. It is said that the geniuses on the floating islands are basically tempered more than 4 times. Come on, I'm a rebirth. 9 times of tempering at the highest level will definitely work. Oyu Xiaotian pumped himself up, and had a perfect spiritual power exercise technique deduced by radar. It was definitely one of the best exercise techniques in the world. He would definitely not be reconciled if he only refined it 3 or 5 times. Don't do it if you don't do it, do your best if you do it. At this moment, Yun Duoer's voice came from outside the door. Bang bang bang. Brother Xiaotian, are you at home? Wait a minute, I'll open the door for you. Oyu Xiaotian yelled, without thinking too much, and went straight to open the gate of the yard. I saw Yun Duoer, dressed in a strong costume, holding a bowl of fish soup, standing at the door happily. The fish soup in her hand was Juling fish soup, which was a cultivation resource she could only receive once this week. After awakening the talented soul, she can receive a bowl of Juling fish soup from teacher Wang Sukai every week, but she chooses to send it to Oyu Xiaotian. Looking at this bowl of soup, Oyu Xiaotian was moved. Brother Xiaotian, look at what this is. With it, you can definitely go further. Yun Duoer said with a smile while holding the fish soup. Let's talk about it first. While Oyu Xiaotian spoke, he reached out and pulled her in, and then closed the door. Brother Xiaotian, you can drink it quickly. Drink it while practicing. The effect is very good. Yun Duoer urged with a smile on his face. Oyu Xiaotian shook his head and said, Duoer, this is your cultivation resource. How can you give it to me? This bowl of gathering fish soup contains more than 300 spiritual power. The radar swept away, and the information of Juling fish soup appeared in his sight. Name, Juling fish soup. Quality, normal. Remarks, the fish soup boiled with Juling fish contains 328 points of spiritual power, which is a rare training resource for the fisherman stage. When he was in a coma before, he had already drank a bowl of Yun Duoer's Juling fish soup, and now he has the ability to catch seafood to replenish his spiritual power. How embarrassed to drink a little girl's training resources. No, you have to drink it. I have awakened the soul now, so that the soul can absorb the aura between the heavens and the earth. It's just a little slower if you don't drink this. Yun Duoer's tone is very firm, although she is not very old, but her character is very stubborn, and the things she decides will not change easily. Duoer, look at this place. I caught a lot of seafood. I really don't lack spiritual power. Oyu Xiaotian pulled Yun Duoer to the fish pond, pointed to the seafood inside, and said aloud, Did you catch these? When did you become so powerful? But you still have to drink it. These seafood are not graded, and their spiritual power is too low. While Yun Duoer was happy, she didn't change her mind and still asked Oyu Xiaotian to drink this precious bowl of Juling fish soup. Okay, you can drink, but you also have to promise me that when I have something good for you in the future, you are not allowed to refuse. Oyu Xiaotian groaned and said he also wanted to open it, although drinking this bowl of Juling fish soup would delay Yun Duoer's cultivation, but when he gets stronger, he can return more. He has this confidence. It is better to cherish it instead of rejecting it. Then you remember to drink. I'll leave first. Yun Duoer was afraid that Oyu Xiaotian would go back, and when he agreed, he stuffed the Juling fish soup into his hand, and then left happily. Then I came to the door and looked at Yun Duoer's back. Until he disappeared, Oyu Xiaotian returned to the house and closed the gate of the yard again. Just practiced for an afternoon, so Oyu Xiaotian was not in a hurry to drink Juling fish soup to practice, but put it out first. Anyway, if it is sealed, it won't be broken after a few days. Cultivation pays attention to relaxation and relaxation. He intends to take a break and continue later. If there is no TV at home, there will be no mobile phones. After the catastrophe, these high-tech products will only be available on the floating islands, and they are quite precious. So after he was free, Oyu Shoutian didn't know what to do. There were too few things to entertain. Forget it, let's admire the moon. Oyu Shoutian jumped on the roof and lay on the eaves, watching the full moon slowly rising in the sky, his thoughts drifting away. 3 days passed in a flash. In these days, Yoon Duor hadn't been here again. It should be because of the heavy training task, or after the fish soup was given to Oyu Shoutian, she could only go to the fishing ground to fish for spirit fish to practice. During these 3 days, Oyu Shoutian also absorbed the juling fish soup, and even the seafood in the fish pond was almost eaten by him. It can be said that the strength has greatly increased. Character, Oyu Shoutian Realm, Level 5 Fisherman Spiritual Power, 89, 89, Gongla, Spiritual Power. Forging Body Art, Incomplete Version, 3 times of skin refining in the current realm, can be deduced to complete the exercise method, requires 9,900 points of aura. Breaking through to the 5th level Fisherman, but Oyu Shoutian's spiritual power is comparable to that of the 8th level Fisherman. Compared to Su Hebo and Zhang Pengpeng, they are no worse. At this time, they were just 8th level Fishermen. In other words, after 3 days of hard practice, he has already caught up with him, and he has even succeeded in overtaking a corner. Yeah, it took 3 days to complete the 3rd tempering of the skin. It seems that you have to work harder. After Oyu Shoutian checked his own data changes, he couldn't help but grinned, still a little dissatisfied. This time thanks to the bowl of juling fish soup. Otherwise, the seafood alone might not be able to complete 3 times of tempering. The more difficult it will become later. It's not just talking. He was owed a lot of favor after giving fish soup twice, and he might not be able to pay it off for the rest of his life. After all, there was no such thing as the first bowl of juling fish soup. He was badly injured by the big fish at the time, and he might not be able to wake up. The skin is tempered 3 times, and the meat can already be refined, but once you are promoted to the flesh refining realm, you can no longer temper your skin, so at this stage, let's continue to temper your skin. Oyu Shoutian murmured, but he had already made a decision. Not to mention whether he can temper his skin to the point of 9 times. But in any case, he must temper to the limit. Now he can continue to temper, why not continue? If he really completes 9 times of skin tempering, maybe he will be able to have the combat power of a fisherman in the fisherman realm. Chapter 6, First Class Fishing Ground, Recommendation Ticket Required. Oyu Shoutian now has the combat power of a senior fisherman, and he can already go to the fishing grounds alone. As long as he is careful, the safety problem is not big. There is no need to worry about cultivation resources at all. With the radar there, he can definitely catch enough aquariums in the fishing grounds. So, determined to continue to temper the skin is undoubtedly the most correct choice. After all, the foundation determines future achievements. The more times the skin is tempered, the higher the future achievements will be. But before Oyu Shoutian set off to the fishing ground, Yoon Duor found her again. She hadn't seen her for a few days, and her strength had improved a lot, and she had already stepped into the fisherman realm with half her foot. Brother Shoutian, I came to see you. As soon as Yoon Duor entered the door, he shouted happily. You just came here. My strength has improved a lot now. Tell me about the fishing grounds. I plan to go back and go fishing in the fishing grounds. When Oyu Shoutian saw Yoon Duor, he was ready to learn from her. He was only a level 1 fisherman before, and he hadn't been to the fishing grounds a few times when he tried the team. He finally got the chance to go once, but was knocked out by the big fish. It can be said to be a shame. Now I plan to re-explore the fishing grounds, and I still go alone, without the angler leading the team. Naturally I have to get a good understanding of it. What? You're going to the fishing ground? No. You can't go to the fishing ground alone. Yoon Duor suddenly became worried. In her opinion, even if Oyu Shoutian becomes stronger, there is a limit. Going to the fishery alone is just an act of dying, and she absolutely does not allow it. Don't worry, I already have the strength of an 8th level fisherman now, don't believe me. As soon as Oyu Shoutian said, he waved a punch, directly hitting A sonic boom, and the power of this punch was much stronger than that of the previous world champion Tyson. Yoon Duoer suddenly showed a look of surprise, and then became happy. You actually broke through. Not bad. Such strength is not worse than mine. But soon she shook her head again and continued, you still don't want to go to the fishery alone. I will tell Teacher Wang, let him take you. Back to the trial team. Although Oyu Sheoshan's strength has improved, it is still quite dangerous to go to the fishery alone, so she thinks it is best to rejoin the trial team, at least to have a response. Oyu Shoutian shook his head, and said, no, I'm just outside the fishing ground. If I don't go deep, there should be no problem. You should tell me about the fishing ground. The radar problem is not easy to explain, so he still plans to act alone. Seeing that Oyu Sheoshan's decision could not be changed, Yoon Duoer could only tell the situation about the fishing grounds. The fishing grounds managed by their village are actually the first-class fishing grounds in Kingmu Town. Their fishing village only has the right to manage, and the villagers need to pay fish taxes to go fishing. Every time you go in, you have to pay 100 caddies of first-class spirit fish as a fish tax, which is collected by the guards of the fishery. Most of these fish taxes have to be handed over to Kingmu Town. The remaining part is used for taxes in exchange for living materials and used as the village's financial expenditure. Among the first-level fishing grounds, the aquariums are mainly low-level. 0 level. The closer to the center of the fishing ground and the closer to the seabed, the higher the level of the aquarium. There is generally no danger if you just fish on the sea. After being caught, the spirit fish has lost most of its combat power. As long as you are careful, even a high-level fisherman can subdue a low-level spirit fish. However, to be on the safe side, most of the anglers act in teams to avoid accidents. Speaking of this, Yoon Duoer said in a deep voice, Brother Shoutian, if you must go to the fishing grounds, it is best to team up with other people in the village and at least have some care. Well, don't worry about this, I will consider it. By the way, do you have any extra fishing rods? My fishing rod was caught in the sea during the previous trial. At this point, Oyu Shoutian also smiled awkwardly. At that time, I was stunned by a big fish. Not only the big fish ran away, but the fishing rod in his hand was also dragged away. It can be said to be a shame. If you can keep the fish, at least it is not a failure. My dad is the village head, and there are so many fishing rods at home. Go to my house to get them at night. Yoon Duoer said a little arrogantly. Okay, then it's settled. Oyu Shoutian nodded and said, it's already 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I will prepare some bait later. I will go to Yoon Duoer's house to get the fishing rod in the evening, and I can set off for the fishing ground tomorrow. Okay, then I'll go first. Yoon Duoer said goodbye and left. She was still busy training, but she was still a little worried about Oyu Shoutian, so she made a detour to take a look. Now that Oyu Shoutian is okay, she is relieved. After Yoon Duoer left, Oyu Shoutian also went out with a plastic box. He was going to go to the bamboo forest to catch bait now. There are 2 commonly used fishing baits. One is the green worm on bamboo leaves, and the other is the most commonly used earthworm, both of which can be found in bamboo forests. The land of the bamboo forest is black soil, which is very fertile, and many earthworms can be dug casually. More than 10 minutes later, Oyu Shoutian came to the bamboo forest. It's Shoutian, are you here to dig earthworms? Uncle Zhang, who was guarding the bamboo forest, couldn't help asking aloud when he saw Oyu Shoutian coming over. This bamboo forest is the common property of the village. When you go out fishing, you must come here to get bait. In order to prevent everyone from digging randomly, an elderly person is specially arranged to take care of it. Hello, Uncle Zhang, I'm here to prepare some bait. Oyu Shoutian greeted him, stretched out his hand to support Uncle Zhang, and said aloud. Uncle Zhang is more than 80 years old. He is a high-level fisherman, and his body is fairly tough. There are also groups of children at home, so he has a good life. The most important thing is that Uncle Zhang is one of Oyu Sheoshan's neighbors, and he also takes good care of Oyu Shoutian. He used to eat at Uncle Zhang's house. I have a box of earthworms. The ones I just dug today are all good products. You can take them directly. As for the green worms, you can only catch them yourself. My old man has bad eyesight and can't catch that stuff. Uncle Zhang showed a kind smile, very happy for Oyu Sheoshan's closeness. In his heart, He also treats Oyu Shoutian as a grandson, so he usually takes care of Oyu Shoutian very much, and basically helps as long as he can. Oyu Shoutian also said happily, "Thank you, Uncle Zhang. I heard that Wang Sukai kicked you out of the trial team. Don't worry, I will give him a good meal and promise him to invite you back." Uncle Zhang's grand way. As the older generation in the village, he has paid a lot for the construction of the village. Even if Wang Su is the fisherman, as long as he comes forward, he believes that Wang Su will save face. "Don't, this is over. I can be alone now, so it won't be troublesome. Don't worry, I can go fishing in ordinary waters without my teammates. Nothing will happen." Oyu Shoutian hurriedly stopped. He didn't want to make a big mess. After all, it was a foregone conclusion, and it was useless to make a big mess. Besides, he is driving alone now, and there is a big secret existence of fishing boat clone. There is no need to go back to the trial team. "Well, if you need any help, remember to come to me. Don't be polite to Uncle Zhang, you know." Seeing Oyu Shoutian's resoluteness, Uncle Zhang also nodded and agreed, and decided not to intervene anymore. "Well, don't worry, Uncle Zhang, I know, I'm going to catch the green worm first." After Oyu Shoutian finished speaking, he took a box of earthworms given by Uncle Zhang and ran away, entered the bamboo forest, and started catching green worms. Chapter 7. First fishing. The color of the green worm is the same as the bamboo leaf. It is hidden in the bamboo leaf. It is difficult to find if the eyes are bad, but Oyu Shoutian has radar scanning, and it is not difficult for him to catch the worm. Scanning by radar, a 3D interface appeared in front of him, and it directly overlapped with the green bamboo forest. It was directly marked out where there was a green worm. He just walked over and took it down and put it in the plastic box, and it was okay. In less than half an hour, he caught a box of green worms, and then said goodbye to Uncle Zhang. "Uncle Zhang, I will catch it, and I will see you later when I have time." "Well, remember to come often when you have time." Uncle Zhang also responded happily. Then Oyu Shoutian went home directly. 2 boxes of bait, 1 box of earthworms and 1 box of green worms, enough for him to use for a while. After arriving home, Oyu Shoutian started practicing again. Before I knew it, it was night. After dinner, Oyu Shoutian went out again, walked directly to the village chief's house, and soon came to a large courtyard. "Shoutian, what are you sneaking in? Come in, have you eaten yet?" The gate of the yard was open, and the village chief Yunhai in the yard couldn't help but say aloud when he saw Oyu Shoutian looking out. "After eating, I'm here to find Duer to borrow a fishing rod," Oyu Shoutian said embarrassedly. Seeing the sea of clouds always made him a little uncomfortable, and he couldn't tell the specifics. It was like seeing the old husband, and he was awkward. "Brother Shoutian, here you are, here, the fishing rod is ready for you." Hearing the movement of clouds also came out, and said happily. Oyu Shoutian hurriedly walked over, took the fishing rod, and the matching fishing line and hook, and said, "Thank you. You're polite with me, you used to take care of me. Now that I am stronger, it is naturally my turn to take care of you," Yun Duer said triumphantly. "Hey." Oyu Shoutian smirked and didn't know what to say. It was Duer and her father who made him embarrassed to speak. Then he found an excuse and hurriedly flashed people. Looking at his back, Yunhai said aloud, "My dear daughter, it doesn't matter how you treat this kid, but he really doesn't deserve you. Don't have any bad thoughts." "Dad, what are you talking nonsense? I won't talk to you anymore." Yun Duer blushed and ran back to the house after speaking. Oyu Shoutian, who was already far away, naturally didn't know the conversation between the two. After he got the fishing rod, he also walked and fiddled with the fishing rod in his hand. Fishing at sea uses cast rods with reels, but the reels are not cranked, but controlled by spiritual power, including the movement of casting and reeling. There is a positive and negative rotation driving array on it, which can be controlled by inputting spiritual power, and it can be easily taken up and released, which is very easy to use. The fishing rod is also made of strong and elastic materials. Even if you catch a large fish, it will not break the fishing rod, and it is protected by spiritual power, and it is fine to catch thousands of heavy objects. The entire fishing rod can be used for both fishing and as a weapon. Everything has it, only Dongfeng owes it. After returning home and putting the fishing rod in place, Oyu Shoutian was full of anticipation and waited for tomorrow morning to set off. If it wasn't for the awakening of the soul, he didn't want to go to the fishing ground so soon. He could wait until his strength became stronger, but the best stage for awakening the soul was 12 years old. He is now 12 years old. The longer he drags, the more difficult it is to awaken, so he dared not drag, so he rushed to the fishing ground to see if he could catch rare aquariums. As a rebirth, he doesn't like ordinary aquariums. The aquarium he used to awaken didn't talk about perfect quality, but at least a rare quality, even if it was a precious quality. He didn't like it, because he knows that the foundation is very important. According to his plan, not to catch the rare fish tomorrow, but to get acquainted with the fishing ground first, and at the same time gradually improve his strength, and finally get the right rare spirit fish, and then awaken with the secret medicine. So tomorrow is just to get acquainted with the fishery. Time passed quietly in the cultivation, the moon rose and the moon fell, and the night passed. At 5 o'clock in the morning, Oyu Shoutian had already left. The fishery was hundreds of nautical miles away from the village, so everyone who went to the fishery set off at this point. Before the sky lighted up, Oyu Shoutian came to the port of the village. I found a corner with no one, looked around, and after making sure that no one was paying attention, he released the fishing boat clone and jumped on it. Immediately after a thought, the power-driven formation of the fishing boat clone was activated, and the fishing boat clone was also heading toward the fishing ground. As the fishing boat clone kept moving away from the port, Oyu Shoutian's mood became more and more excited, but he did not care, but let the clone radar scan the surroundings all the time. As long as there is danger, it can be found in the first place. When we arrived at the fishing grounds, the sun had already risen, and the patrol team of the fishing grounds had already patrolled the sea. Obviously they had come earlier. The range of this level of fishing grounds is not very large, about 10 nautical miles. After Oyu Shoutian entered the periphery of the fishing ground, he stopped the fishing boat and was not prepared to go further. Soon, the patrol team from the fishing ground also came to register. Xiaotian, it's you. How can you be alone or in a team? It's not safe. A middle-aged man approached in a fishing boat, and after confirming the identity of Oyu Shoutian, he couldn't help but yelled, "Uncle Li, don't worry, I'm on the periphery, not going deep, it's okay." Oyu Shoutian replied with a smile. "Forget it, be careful by yourself and call out whenever you have something to do. As for the fish tax, you can take care of it yourself. You can pay it if you catch too much. If you get too little, forget it. I'll tell you over there," Li Shu said loudly. For the orphan Oyu Shoutian, he took great care of him. "Thank you Uncle Li, I get it." Oyu Shoutian nodded and thanked. Then Li Shu left with the fishing boat of the patrol team. Oyu Shoutian also started fishing. After the bait was put on, the fishing rod flicked, and under the control of spiritual power, the hook suddenly threw out more than 100 meters and fell into the sea. Then Oyu Shoutian sat down. The spiritual power in his body was also maintained. As long as a fish was hooked, he could immediately perceive it. The radar scan is turned on, and the 3D interface coincides with reality. The sea seemed to be seen through. It was clear where there was a fish. Oyu Shoutian's hook fell next to a big fish, and the earthworm on the hook was still twisting. Crack! The big fish swimming nearby quickly spotted the earthworm, and then took a bite. The speed was really fast and cruel, but with this bite, he caught the bait. When Oyu Shoutian mentioned his fishing rod, he immediately caught the big fish. Then he made a decisive decision and directly increased the output of spiritual power. The surface of the fishing line began to emit fluorescence, and the reel began to rotate to take up the line, and the big fish of more than 20 kilograms was quickly pulled up. The moment the big fish left the water, he also launched an attack. With a shot of his body, he ejected towards Oyu Shoutian with terrifying force. Court death. Oyu Shoutian screamed and flicked his fishing rod, swiftly, hitting the big fish's head fiercely, knocking the big fish stunned directly on the deck. However, the force of the big fish's impact was also very fierce, and it was transmitted to his hands through the fishing rod, which also caused Oyu Shoutian's hands to numb slightly, and he couldn't help taking a step back. It can be seen how fierce this big fish is. Chapter 8, Horror Sea Snake. After confirming that the big fish would not be able to jump again, Oyu Shoutian breathed a sigh of relief, and his nervousness also eased, and then he looked at the big fish carefully. This is a yellow croaker weighing more than 20 kilograms. I have to say that it is fate. During the fishing trial, he was knocked out by a yellow croaker. This is revenge. Name, yellow croaker level 0 and level 1 quality, normal spiritual power, 1215 points. Remarks, the delicious sea fish contains rich spiritual power and is a rare ingredient. The radar also directly scanned the attributes of this big fish. Tier 0 and Tier 1 are classified aquariums. They are extremely fast in the sea, and their combat power is comparable to that of a first-level angler. If it hadn't been out of the water and had lost most of his combat power, Oyu Shoutian might not have been able to fight it. Yes. It shouldn't be difficult to get more than 20 caddies in one go, enough to make up 100 caddies of fish tacks. A smile appeared on Oyu Shoutian's face. Before he really caught the fish, he was actually a little worried. After all, he was really unfamiliar with the fishing technique, and it could only be said to be a blind operation. After the harvest, Oyu Shoutian was very motivated. He rolled up his sleeves and continued to dry. After putting on the bait again, he flicked the rod again and the hook fell into the sea more than 100 meters away. Scanning by radar, it still fell to a place with a lot of fish. But not every fish is so stupid. This time the big fish did not rush to bite the hook after approaching the bait, but wandered around vigilantly. As a result, before the big fish had time to bite the hook, a small fish jumped out and ate the bait. Fishing failed. Oyu Shoutian didn't feel annoyed either. After taking the hook back, he threw away the small fish hanging on it, put on the bait again, and continued to cast the rod. This time he paid special attention and chose a place with few small fish to cast his rod. For those little fish, it can be said that all anglers hate it. As the sun gradually rises, there are more people in the fishing grounds, and other fishermen gradually arrive. Not far from Oyu Shoutian, there was a medium-sized fishing boat with 6 people on it. All high-level anglers were middle-aged uncles in the village, and they were all the kind of hopeless breakthroughs. Because after the age of 12, the difficulty of awakening the spirits continues to increase. If you exceed the age of 15, you will be kicked out of the trial team, and you can only rely on yourself. Those who have not awakened after 20 years of age basically have no chance, and they will be fishermen for the rest of their lives. If you can't become a fisherman, you can only be an ordinary fisherman, and you can enter the first-class fishing grounds at most, but you can't go to more advanced fishing grounds. Oyu Shoutian was not familiar with these uncles, so he didn't say hello either. Everyone fished in their own way, but they were from the same village. If there was an accident, everyone would help each other. The 2 fishing boats, one large and one small, are about 100 meters apart, and their fishing rods are thrown toward the inner periphery of the fishing ground. Unlike Oyu Shoutian, they cast their rods selectively. There are more people, and I feel a lot safer. Before he knew it, Oyu Shoutian was also relieved, no longer so depressed. On the boundless sea, no one can see, just a small fishing boat floating around. It's not a joke. Even if you don't feel uneasy, you will feel uncomfortable. After all, people are social creatures. When there were more people, the patrol team of the fishing ground became busy. They had to register the new ships, and all the ships were equipped with radars, especially the patrol boats, which had more advanced radars. The radar can scan the entire fishing grounds. As long as there is a fishing boat approaching, they can find it, and then come over to register. It's just that their radar can only identify ships. Not as good as the radar of Oyu Shoutian's fishing boat clone, which is a mutated magical radar. Suddenly, Oyu Shoutian, who was sitting on the deck, stood up suddenly and looked in the direction of the medium-sized fishing boat next door, only to see that something went wrong there. Be careful, it's the sea snake. Someone over there already exclaimed. However, it was too late, and the sea snake flew up after leaving the water. Not only did it break free from the hook, but the lightning generally bit the hand of one of them. The sea snake is not another aquatic race. It broke away from the sea, but its fighting power was not weakened. While biting one person, the huge snake's tail flicked and hit the other 2. Boom! Accompanied by a loud noise, the 2 of them tried their best to resist, but they were still taken away. Thump! 2 falling water sounds sounded almost at the same time, and the 2 who were pumped off fell directly into the sea. Facing the sea snake, the killer of the fishermen, this team was defeated in an instant. Although the other 2 were not injured, they were already terrified and retreated involuntarily. Wow! There was a sound of breaking through. the sky, but Oyu Shoutian made the shot. The fishing boat clone was under his control, and the heavy crossbow on it locked the sea snake and shot an arrow with great precision. When the sea snake hit the two of them, the 1-meter-long arrow accurately shot at the sea snake's 7 inches. Position. Shishi. The sea snake let out a scream, then slammed heavily on the deck. His body was still twisting, but it was obviously dead. After the accident, the patrol team also rushed over. But the person who was bitten by the sea snake was no longer saved. The poison was too deep, and the patrol team died when they arrived. The two who fell into the water were also seriously injured, but they were quickly rescued, but there was no danger to their lives. Xiao Tian, did you shoot this arrow? Uncle Li of the patrol team looked at the sea snake hitting the arrow with a shocked look on his face. This is the equipment on the fishing boat. It is a heavy crossbow. The accuracy is not high. Most of the time, it is only designed for large prey or pirate ships. The lethality of precision strikes is not high. Although this sea snake was 7 or 8 meters long, it was only as thick as its arm. Oyu Shoutian was able to hit the key with an arrow, which surprised him. Hey, Uncle Li, I'm just lucky, Oyu Shoutian said with a smile. He can't explain the radar thing. The radar lock is just a basic function, which makes the heavy crossbow that was originally lucky enough to become extremely accurate. Regardless of your luck or strength, you have saved the 4 of them. If it weren't for you, it is estimated that they will be finished. Take this sea snake. Uncle Li quickly made the decision. Of course, the few people who were rescued did not dare to have any opinions. They were able to survive. They are already thankful, so how dare they the ownership of the sea snake from Oyu Shoutian? Thank you, Uncle Li. Oyu Shoutian is also welcome, mentioning the dead sea snake. Returning to his fishing boat, and directly putting the sea snake into the fish cabin. The fish tanks are separated. One side is a water tank, which contains live seafood, and the other is a freezer tank, which contains dead ones. Soon, the patrol team also left. The team sacrificed 1 member and seriously injured 2 people. The remaining people did not plan to continue fishing, and drove the fishing boat back to the fishing village. In this era, fishermen are a high-risk profession, and everyone is used to sacrifices, so there is nothing to be sad. This time they encountered a fisherman killer, and they only sacrificed 1 person. They were already lucky, because the fishing of the Shanghai snake caused the entire army to be wiped out. Chapter 9, Iron Headfish, Recommendation Ticket. Required, this sea snake was an unexpected harvest for Oyu Shoutian, but it also reminded him to know what prey was hooked before catching it. Otherwise, once you catch some amphibious horror aquariums, the characters may change instantly, and the prey may become hunters. Soon, Oyu Shoutian focused on fishing again. Not long after, a group of ironhead fish entered the surveillance range of the radar. Name, Iron Headfish Level, Level 0 and Level 1 Quality, Normal Aura, 1312 points. Remarks, it is a variation of big headfish. Fish head soup is the most delicious. It is a rare top-quality ingredient. This group of iron-headed fish is big or small. There are dozens of them. The big ones have reached Level 0 and Level 1. The small ones are not graded, but the aura contained in them is also dozens or hundreds. Oyu Shoutian didn't hesitate. With a flick of the fishing rod, the hook fell on the path of the group of iron-headed fish, and soon the iron-headed fish bit the hook. Crackle! The surface of the water was violent, splashing water, and Oyu Shoutian only felt a strong force coming. This iron-head fish was so powerful that he was almost drawn into the sea when he was caught off guard. Fortunately, he was able to hold the ship's side with his hands in time, which was really thrilling. Damn it! Oyu Shoutian felt the power coming from the fishing rod, and couldn't help feeling a little depressed, too careless. The iron head of the iron-head fish is not just talking about it. After being hooked by the fish hook, other aquariums will reduce their struggle because of the pain, and then they will be pulled out of the water smoothly. After leaving the water, most of the combat power has been lost. Even if it is in the water comparable to the angler's realm, the fisherman can subdue it after landing on the shore. However, this iron-headed fish was different. When the head iron was hooked, it was not afraid of pain and struggled desperately. Give me, Oyu. Shoutian grasped the fishing rod tightly with both hands, stepped on the deck with one foot, and put the other foot on the ship's gunwale, pulling the line vigorously. Fortunately, His little fishing boat was transformed and mutated through mysterious energy, and its balance is particularly strong. Otherwise, it won't be able to hold it at all, and maybe the boat will capsize. Shoot it to me. Seeing the ironhead fish constantly struggling on the sea, Oyu Shoutian suddenly had an idea. The heavy crossbow on the fishing boat's body was activated again, and an arrow was shot out, accurately shooting the ironhead fish. In an instant, the ironhead fish lost its strength and was quickly caught by Oyu Shoutian. Finally, it was caught. No wonder other fishermen have to form a team. If someone helps, there is no need to worry about not being able to pull it up. Oyu Shoutian couldn't help but sighed. But soon he stopped thinking about it anymore. He could handle it by himself. He took out the fish hook numbly, then pulled out the long arrow on the ironhead fish, reinstalled it on the heavy crossbow, and then put the ironhead fish into the fish hold freezer. Dead seafood will be kept fresh on the frozen side. However, just when Oyu Shoutian was about to continue to bait, an unexpected scene appeared, and the remaining school of ironhead fish actually launched an impact on the fishing boat clone. Boom boom. There was a crash. Now Oyu Shoutian had no choice. The ironhead fish were all under the fishing boat, and the heavy crossbow could not be shot, and after being provoked, it was impossible to get the bait. Fortunately, the fishing boat clone is strong enough that it cannot be easily destroyed by low-level aquarists. However, Oyu Shoutian was also worried about being hit by iron-headed fish like this. If the fishing boat's avatar was hit and fell apart, it would be really bad. So after knowing that he could not solve it, he directly called the patrol team for support. It was Uncle Li and his team that came over. Shoutian, what happened? As soon as Li Shu and others came over, they asked loudly, Uncle Li, there is an ironhead fish hitting my fishing boat underwater, do you have a way? Oyu Shoutian responded loudly, don't worry, this will solve it for you. Uncle Li responded, and then he greeted several team members to go into the water. As a fisherman, after refining the skin, they have awakened the talented souls. They can breathe underwater, and killing some ironhead fish is just a simple matter. After a while, they came up with 2 ironhead fish alone. Shoutian, it's done. After returning to the fishing boat, Uncle Li raised a 30-jin ironhead fish in his hand and said loudly, thank you Uncle Li. By the way, I have caught a lot of aquariums. I will pay the fish tax by the way. Oyu Shoutian asked the fishing boat to approach the fishing boat of the patrol team, and then took out 3 more than 30 caddies of Tier 0 fish and handed them to the members of the patrol team. Good boy, it really is a tiger father without a dog. Uncle Li couldn't help sighing. Obviously, he and Oyu Shoutian's father knew each other. After that, the 2 sides didn't talk much. Li Shu left with the team members, but his team members were surprised and they were still talking in a low voice. Brotherly, didn't it mean that Oyu Shoutian was kicked out of the trial team? His strength is very poor. I think this level is very good. On the fishing boat of the patrol, someone couldn't help but utter a voice. That's right, is Wang Sukai blind? Such a good seedling actually gave up. The other person also spoke out. Wang Sukai can't be blamed for this. Shoutian's previous strength was really not good. Wang Sukai was also worried that something happened to him, causing Oyu Jiaju to kick him out. It seemed that he had suddenly regained his senses. A single person could catch so many spirit fish. As long as the luck is not too bad, it shouldn't be a problem to catch precious quality spirit fish. Uncle Li showed a happy smile. He was naturally aware of the fact that Oyu Shoutian was kicked out of the patrol, and he knew even more that Wang Su's purpose for doing this was actually for the good of Oyu Shoutian. Well, it seems that Wang Su is the wrong one. On the other side, Oyu Shoutian was busy again. But this time, he didn't dare to attack some schools of fish anymore. Instead, he specifically picked some large fish that were alone and caught them one by one. The efficiency was slower, but the victory was safe. It didn't take long for Oyu Shoutian to discover a swordfish of precious quality. Name, swordfish level 0, level 1 quality, precious spiritual power, 1945 points. Remarks, swordfish that are extremely fast in the water and can shoot sword auras, which are not weak in lethality. Spirit power is more than 1,900, this is close to the 2nd level, and it is almost able to break through. So Oyu Shoutian suddenly hesitated. Do you want to make a move? But after thinking of Yun Duor, Oyu Shoutian decided to take action. Swordfish of precious quality are rare. For Yun Duor, who has already awakened as the soul of Yin-Yang Swordfish, it can enhance the sword aura of Yin-Yang Swordfish. Yun Duor helped him so much, and now he has a chance to return, he naturally doesn't want to miss it. Besides, as long as he is more careful, with the help of the fishing boat clone, the chance to deal with this swordfish is still great. Thinking of this, Oyu Shoutian decided to pay attention. And the bait of the hook was replaced with a green worm, which was a higher grade bait than the earthworm. Then the fishing rod flicked and the hook landed near the swordfish, waiting for the swordfish to be hooked. Chapter 10, Free Swordfish. The precious quality swordfish is not low in intelligence. After discovering the bait, it did not swallow it the first time, but carefully tried it out before biting it. The main reason is that the lure of green worms is too great for the aquarium. This kind of bait exudes a fragrance, and most aquariums like to eat it. Took it. Oyu Shoutian's heart moved, and his spirits immediately lifted. This time he didn't take up the line directly, but chose to take a walk first and consume the swordfish's physical strength. But this process consumes a lot of spiritual power. But he was not afraid. He decided to get this swordfish, and then returned. Even if his spiritual power was exhausted, he would not be afraid. Crackle! After the swordfish came out of the water, it continued to struggle and splashed with water. But this time Oyu Shoutian didn't use the heavy crossbow attached to the fishing boat. Since he planned to give a gift, it would be best to give it alive, so he planned to catch the swordfish. Unless you have a last resort, you will choose to shoot with a heavy crossbow. Back. Seeing the swordfish rushing over, Oyu Shoutian controlled the fishing boat clone to retreat for the first time, preventing the swordfish from approaching, while shaking the fishing rod to control the fishing line, so that the swordfish could not maintain a straight line. Otherwise, the speed of the fishing boat clone would not be as fast as the swordfish. In the end, it slipped for more than an hour, and the sun passed over his head, and the swordfish stopped struggling. It should be almost there. Feeling the strength coming from the fishing rod, Oyu Shoutian decided to take up the line. However, at the moment when the swordfish caught on the fishing boat, the swordfish still made its final blow, and a sword aura shot towards Oyu Shoutian frontally, instantly critical. However, Oyu Shoutian was prepared for a long time. He squatted and escaped the blow dangerously. Sword chi flew over his hair, and a small amount of hair fell off. Then Oyu Shoutian knocked out the exhausted swordfish with a backhand. Then he took off the hook, then took out a dagger, and cut off the pointed part of the swordfish's head so that the swordfish could no longer launch a sword attack. Really tired. After putting the swordfish in the fish tank, Oyu Shoutian sat down on the deck. Originally, after fishing for a whole morning, his spiritual power was almost consumed. The more than an hour of walking the swordfish almost made him unable to hold on. Fortunately, it finally succeeded. Then with a thought, he controlled the fishing boat clone and began to turn, returning to Bayun village. After 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I returned to the port, found a corner with no one, put the fishing boat away, and then walked towards home. Before having space equipment, he can only be careful. Try not to let people discover the magic of the fishing boat clone. Although the people in the village are very united, there is nothing wrong with being careful. I'm finally home. The first fishing trip is officially over. Oyu Shoutian put the fishing rod in place, then came to the side of the fish pond, and emptied the catch in the fish tank. Only alive, he almost filled the fish pond. If this harvest is mentioned, it will definitely shock the entire small fishing village. There are at least 500 caddies of catches, and most of them are graded spirit fish, which is of amazing value. Many fishermen squads only get 1,000 caddies in one day, and pay the fish tax per head. There are less than 300 or 200 caddies left for the classification. For another point, a person is only a few dozen caddies. And Oyu Shoutian paid the fish tax, and there were still hundreds of caddies of classified fish. It is absolutely enviable to say it. In addition, there are still a lot of dead catches, which are more than 300 caddies. There is a freezer in the fish hold, and it can only be placed in the fish hold first. But Oyu Shoutian took out the sea snake corpse and prepared to get it to eat first. Although this sea snake is a fisherman killer, but the meat quality is not enough, and it is a big supplement, enough for him to eat today. Name, Sea Snake Level 0 and Level 2 Quality, Precious Spiritual Power, 2538 points remarks, the deep-sea spirit snake contains scarce dragon blood, and the meat is delicious, and it is a rare ingredient. After reading the radar identification, OU Shoutian couldn't help drooling. Unfortunately, the sea snake was shot and killed by the heavy crossbow of the fishing boat clone, not he caught it. Otherwise, he wants to equip the secret medicine to awaken the soul. Although the sea snake is only a precious quality, its potential is no longer low. It has the blood of the dragon, and as long as it is well cultivated, the future will not be too bad. It's a pity that it wasn't caught. Go ahead. After a busy day, OU Shoutian is also hungry. Wash the pot and boil water, then peel and wash the sea snake, then chop it into pieces, and stew it in a pot. The weight is so full that it almost can't be stewed. Unfortunately, there is no seasoning. Apart from salt in the village, it seems that there are no other seasonings for sale. It seems that during the catastrophe period, many plants mutated, and few people know the seasoning plants. Now people are studying submarine spiritual plants that can improve their strength, and they don't pay much attention to the few seasoning plants that are preserved on land. Gradually, many people no longer know each other. This is something that OU Shoutian couldn't think of now. He only thought that it was not sold in the village. In fact, it is not sold in the current human society, and no one is going to plant it. However, the spirit snake is the spirit snake. After containing the spiritual power, it is not ordinary. Even without those seasonings, the taste is even better than many delicacies in the previous life. The main thing is that the ingredients are too good. After eating a few large bowls, the spiritual power in his body slowly recovered, and OU Shoutian became vigorous again, no longer as empty as before. To be honest, the feeling of exhaustion of spiritual power is really uncomfortable. Although it is not as immobile like exhausted, but there is a feeling of emptiness in the body, and it will feel very weak. Finally, I came back to life, first return the fishing rod, and then come back to practice again. OU Shoutian took a look at the time, and it was almost 5 o'clock. It was estimated that Yun Duoer should also be at home, so he decided to return the fishing rod first, and then return to practice. After all, once you start practicing, you can easily forget the time. The sea snake was stewed in a small fire, and OU Shoutian picked up the swordfish from the fish pond and put it into the fish basket, then took the fishing rod and went straight out. Duoer, I'm here to return your fishing rod, are you at home? When he came to the door of the village chief's house, OU Shoutian shouted, coming. Yun Duoer answered inside, and then quickly opened the door. Following Yun Duoer into the yard and handing her the fishing rod, OU Shoutian said, today's harvest is good, thanks to your fishing rod. No accident, right? Seeing OU Shoutian come back safely, Yun Duoer asked happily. Everything went well. By the way, this is for you. With luck, I caught a rare swordfish. I will put it in the fish pond. You can't refuse. While OU Shoutian spoke, he also took the fish basket from his back and walked towards the fish pond in the yard, and then put the swordfish weighing more than 10 kilograms into it. The swordfish is long and slender, and the weight is not very heavy, but the swordfish of the second-class treasure is undoubtedly quite precious. Although there are many aquariums in the fish pond, there is no one that can match this swordfish. OU Shoutian couldn't help but feel proud. Brother Shoutian, there is no shortage of fish in my house, you should take the swordfish back. When Yun Duoer recovered, OU Shoutian had already put the swordfish in the fish pond. Duoer, when I drank your juling fish soup before, but as I said before, you must not refuse to give me things in the future, otherwise I will not accept your things in the future. OU Shoutian said with a serious face. Now Yun Duoer has nothing to say, she can only accept this swordfish, but she is also very happy. In her heart, as long as OU Shoutian treats her well, she will be happy. Moreover, this precious swordfish is also a rare tonic for her who has awakened the talent of Yin-Yang swordfish. Well, then I will accept it. Yun Duoer nodded, also showing a happy smile. Then the two chatted for a while, then OU Shoutian left, otherwise he would be uncomfortable when the village chief came back.